The morning sun cast long shadows across the military recruitment center as Sarah Martinez stepped out of the building, her rejection letter crumpled in her trembling fist. The crisp October air bit at her cheeks, but the cold she felt inside ran much deeper. 23 years old, with dreams as big as the Texas sky she'd grown up under, she had just been told she wasn't good enough to serve her country. Physical requirements not met, the officer had said, barely looking up from his clipboard. Coordination scores below acceptable threshold. We suggest you consider other career paths, miss. Sarah's mind raced back to that moment as she sat on a bench outside the building, watching other hopeful recruits stream in and out. Some emerged with smiles and firm handshakes, their dreams intact. Others, like her, walked out with slumped shoulders and shattered aspirations. She had trained for months, running every morning at dawn, doing push-ups until her arms screamed, practicing at the local shooting range with her grandfather's old hunting rifle. None of it had been enough. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Miguel. "How did it go, sis? We're all waiting to hear." The family group chat was probably lighting up with messages of support and anticipation. How could she tell them that their hopes, like hers, had been crushed in a sterile government office? Growing up in a military family had shaped Sarah's entire worldview. Her grandfather had served in Vietnam, coming home with stories that painted service as both honor and duty. Her father had done 2 tours in Iraq before an IED injury forced him into early retirement. The uniform represented everything she believed in: purpose, sacrifice, and the chance to make a real difference in the world. Now that path seemed permanently closed to her. Sarah made her way to her beat-up Honda Civic, the rejection letter still clutched in her hand. As she drove through the city streets, memories of her childhood flooded back. She remembered sitting at the kitchen table, listening to her father and grandfather swap stories about their service. The way their eyes lit up when they talked about their units, their brothers in arms, the missions that mattered. She had wanted that belonging, that sense of purpose that seemed to radiate from them even years later. The small apartment she shared with her roommate felt emptier than usual when she arrived home. Melissa was at work, leaving Sarah alone with her disappointment and a stack of bills on the counter. The rejection stung not just emotionally but practically too. She had been counting on the military to provide structure, training, and a way out of the cycle of dead-end jobs that had defined her life since high school. Her current position at a local diner paid barely enough to cover rent and groceries. The work was honest but unfulfilling, consisting mainly of taking orders from truckers and construction workers who stopped by during their lunch breaks. Her manager, a perpetually stressed woman named Janet, had already made it clear that Sarah's requested time off for military training was unprofessional and showed poor commitment to the team. That evening, Sarah called her father to break the news. The disappointment in his voice was almost unbearable, not because he was angry with her, but because he understood exactly how much this rejection meant. "Mija," he said, using the nickname he'd called her since childhood, "sometimes the path we think we want isn't the one we're meant to walk. This doesn't define you." But Sarah felt defined by it anyway. She had always struggled with coordination and balance, something that had made her clumsy as a child and anxious as an adult. Sports had been a challenge, dancing was impossible, and even simple tasks sometimes felt awkward. The military's rejection felt like confirmation of every insecurity she'd ever harbored about her physical abilities. Over the next few days, she fell into a routine of self-pity and second-guessing. She replayed the recruitment tests over and over, wondering if she could have done something differently. The obstacle course had been particularly humiliating, with her stumbling through exercises that other candidates completed with ease. The physical fitness test had been adequate but not impressive. And the coordination assessments had been her downfall, confirming what she'd always known but hoped wouldn't matter. A week after the rejection, Sarah was scrolling through her phone during a break at work when an advertisement caught her attention: Precision Shooting Academy, discover your hidden talents. The ad featured a woman in tactical gear. I focused intensely down the scope of a rifle. Something about the image resonated with Sarah, reminding her of the few moments during her recruitment testing when she'd felt truly capable. The shooting portion of the military assessment had actually gone well. While she'd struggled with the physical obstacles and coordination drills, her marksmanship scores had been among the highest in her group. The range instructor had even made a comment about her natural eye for shooting. At the time, she'd been too focused on her failures to pay much attention to her success. Curiosity got the better of her, and she clicked through to the Academy's website. The Precision Shooting Academy was a civilian training facility that offered everything from basic gun safety courses to advanced tactical instruction. Their programs were designed for hunters, competitive shooters, security professionals, and military contractors. The courses were expensive, but they offered payment plans and even some scholarship opportunities for dedicated students. Sarah found herself reading testimonials from former students who had gone on to careers in law enforcement, private security, and competitive shooting. Many of them mentioned how the training had given them confidence and skills they never knew they possessed. One testimonial, from a woman named Jennifer Walsh, particularly struck her. "I came to PSA feeling like a failure after washing out of police academy. I left knowing I had found my true calling as a precision marksman." That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about roads not taken and possibilities she'd never considered. The military had always seemed like the only path to a meaningful career, but maybe there were other ways to serve, other ways to use whatever talents she did possess. The rejection still hurt, but, for the first time since leaving the recruitment center, she felt a spark of something that might have been hope. The next morning, she called the Precision Shooting Academy and spoke with an enrollment counselor named Mark. He listened patiently as she explained her situation, her military rejection, and her interest in learning more about precision shooting. "We get a lot of students who come to us after setbacks," Mark told her. "Sometimes those setbacks turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to them. Why don't you come in for an assessment? We can see what you're working with and discuss options that might fit your situation." Sarah scheduled an appointment for the following Saturday, her first day off in 2 weeks. She spent the intervening days researching everything she could about precision shooting, competitive marksmanship, and career opportunities in the field. The more she learned, the more intrigued she became. This wasn't just about recreational shooting or hunting. Precision marksmanship was a highly technical skill that combined physical control, mental focus, mathematics, and understanding of ballistics and environmental factors. Professional marksmen worked in various fields: military snipers, law enforcement tactical teams, competitive shooters, hunting guides, firearms instructors, and even specialized roles in the entertainment industry as technical advisors and stunt coordinators. Some worked as private contractors, providing security services or training to military and law enforcement agencies. The field required dedication and extensive training, but it offered the kind of purposeful career Sarah had always sought. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Sarah's nervous mood as she drove to the Precision Shooting Academy. The facility was larger than she'd expected, with multiple ranges, classrooms, and what appeared to be a pro shop selling equipment and ammunition. Students of all ages moved between buildings, some carrying rifle cases, others emerging from classes with notebooks and focused expressions. Mark greeted her at the front desk with a firm handshake and a welcoming smile. He was a retired Marine in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to miss nothing. As he led her on a tour of the facility, he explained the Academy's philosophy and approach to training. "We don't just teach people to shoot," he said as they walked past a classroom where an instructor was demonstrating ballistics calculations on a whiteboard. "We teach them to think like precision marksmen. It's about understanding every variable that affects your shot: wind, temperature, humidity, elevation, target movement, equipment characteristics. It's as much mental as it is physical." The tour concluded at an indoor range where they would conduct Sarah's assessment. Mark handed her safety glasses and ear protection, then set up a rifle at a shooting bench. It was a bolt-action precision rifle, heavier and more sophisticated than the hunting rifles she'd used at the local range back home. "We'll start simple," Mark explained, pointing to a target 100 yards downrange. "Just show me what you can do naturally, without any instruction from me. Take your time, focus on your breathing, and let's see what happens." Sarah settled into position behind the rifle, adjusting the stock against her shoulder and peering through the scope. The crosshairs wavered slightly as she found her natural point of aim, then steadied as she controlled her breathing the way her grandfather had taught her years ago. She squeezed the trigger slowly, surprised by the rifle's smooth action and manageable recoil. The first shot was slightly high and to the right. She made a mental adjustment and fired again. The second shot was closer to center. By the fifth shot, she was consistently hitting within a 2-inch group at the center of the target. Mark remained quiet throughout the exercise, watching her technique and taking notes. When she finished the initial string of shots, he called the target forward for examination. His eyebrows rose slightly as he studied the grouping. "Not bad for someone with no formal training," he said, making a note in his file. "Your breathing control is good, and you have a steady hold. Your natural point of aim needs work, and your trigger control could be smoother, but those are technical issues we can address with training." They moved through several more exercises, testing her ability to engage targets at different distances and under various conditions. With each string of shots, Sarah felt more comfortable with the rifle and more confident in her abilities. This felt different from the clumsy, awkward experience of military testing. Here, her body seemed to know what to do without conscious thought. The final exercise involved shooting at a more challenging target 300 yards away. Mark made some adjustments to the scope and explained the basics of compensating for bullet drop at longer distances. Sarah's first few shots missed the target entirely, but once she understood the concepts he was explaining, her accuracy improved dramatically. "Interesting," Mark murmured as they examined the final target. "You adapt quickly once you understand the theory behind what you're doing. That suggests good learning potential." They returned to his office to discuss the assessment results and potential training options. Mark spread out course catalogs and certification requirements, explaining the various paths available to someone with Sarah's apparent aptitude. "Based on what I saw today," he said, "I think you have real potential as a precision marksman. Your hand-eye coordination issues that hurt you in military testing don't seem to affect your shooting. In fact, the stillness and control required for precision work might actually be easier for someone with your physical characteristics than dynamic movement exercises." He outlined a progressive training program that would start with basic marksmanship fundamentals and advance through increasingly sophisticated skills, ballistics calculation, reading environmental conditions, equipment selection and maintenance, and eventually tactical applications. The full program would take 2 years of part-time study, with options to specialize in competitive shooting, hunting applications, or tactical/law enforcement preparation. The cost was substantial, representing months of her current wages, but Mark mentioned several financing options and suggested that her dedication to training might qualify her for one of the Academy's partial scholarships. "What I can't teach you," he said, closing the folder, "is the mental discipline and commitment this requires. Precision shooting isn't just about having a steady hand. It's about developing the patience to practice the same fundamentals thousands of times until they become instinctive. It's about learning to control every variable you can and compensate for those you can't. It's about performing under pressure when every factor is working against you." Sarah left the academy that day with more information than she could process and a decision that would reshape her entire future. The military rejection that had felt like the end of her dreams now seemed like the beginning of a different kind of journey. For the first time since walking out of the recruitment center, she felt genuinely excited about what lay ahead. That night, she called her father to tell him about the assessment. His voice carried a pride she hadn't heard since her college graduation. "Sounds like you found your calling, Nija," he said. "Sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as disappointments." As Sarah lay in bed that night, she thought about the woman in the Academy's advertisement, the focus and confidence in her expression. Maybe someday, with enough dedication and training, she could develop that same sense of purpose and capability. The rejection that had crushed her dreams a week ago now felt like the first step toward something she'd never imagined possible. The transformation from rejected recruit to elite marksman wouldn't be easy, but, for the first time in her adult life, Sarah felt like she was pointed in the right direction. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of enrolling in courses, arranging financing, and taking the first concrete steps toward a future that excited rather than frightened her. The military might not have wanted her, but precision shooting seemed to be calling her name. 3 months into her training at the Precision Shooting Academy, Sarah's life had developed a rhythm she'd never experienced before. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening after her shift at the diner, she drove directly to the academy for instruction. Saturdays were reserved for extended range time, practicing the fundamentals until her shoulder ached and her eyes burned from squinting through scopes. Sundays meant studying ballistics tables, weather patterns, and equipment manuals at the kitchen table of her small apartment. The transformation wasn't happening overnight, but it was undeniably real. Where military training had made her feel clumsy and inadequate, precision shooting seemed to unlock capabilities she'd never known she possessed. Her instructor, a former Army sniper named David Chen, had quickly identified her natural strengths and was systematically building upon them. "Martinez," he said during a particularly challenging session in late January, "stop thinking so much. Your body knows what to do. Trust it." They were working on shooting in various weather conditions, and the day's lesson involved engaging targets in a steady crosswind. Sarah had been struggling to calculate the wind compensation correctly, her shots consistently drifting to the left despite her mathematical adjustments. "I've done the calculations 3 times, she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "The wind speed is 8 miles per hour from the right. At 300 yards with this ammunition, that should require a 2-minute correction." David smiled and shook his head. "You're trying to solve this like a math problem. Precision shooting isn't just about calculations. You need to read the wind with your whole body, not just your brain." He had her close her eyes and feel the wind on her face, listening to how it moved through the trees around the range, observing how it affected the grass and leaves at various distances to the target. Gradually, she began to understand that environmental reading was as much art as science, requiring intuition developed through experience rather than just theoretical knowledge. When she reopened her eyes and settled behind the rifle, something had shifted in her approach. Instead of rigidly following her calculations, she made small adjustments based on what she could observe and feel. Her first shot hit dead center. The second shot followed it exactly. "Better," David said with approval. "You're starting to think like a marksman instead of an accountant." The compliment meant more to Sarah than he probably realized. At the diner, she was just another waitress struggling to make ends meet. At home, she was the family member who hadn't quite found her place in the world. But, here, under David's patient instruction, she was becoming something else entirely. Her progress accelerated through the winter months. The basic marksmanship fundamentals that had seemed impossibly complex in November became second nature by February. She could now consistently hit targets at distances up to 500 yards, a range that would have seemed impossible when she'd started. More importantly, she was beginning to understand the deeper aspects of precision shooting, the mental discipline required to perform under pressure, the systematic approach to problem solving that separated professionals from recreational shooters. David began introducing more advanced concepts, shooting from improvised positions, engaging multiple targets in sequence, compensating for elevation changes and extreme weather conditions. Each new challenge revealed another layer of complexity to the discipline, but also another area where Sarah's natural abilities seemed to shine. "You have something special," David told her one Saturday afternoon as they reviewed targets from a particularly challenging exercise. "Most students take months to develop the kind of consistency you're showing. You're not just learning techniques, you're developing instincts." The comment prompted Sarah to ask a question that had been bothering her for weeks. "Why am I good at this when I was terrible at everything else in military testing? What's different?" David considered the question carefully before responding. Military testing measures dynamic physical capabilities, running, jumping, climbing, reacting quickly to changing situations. Precision shooting is different. It's about absolute control, stillness, and methodical execution. Some of the traits that might hurt you in obstacle courses actually help you behind a rifle. He explained that her naturally slow, deliberate movement patterns, which had been a disadvantage in fast-paced military exercises, were perfect for precision work. Her tendency to overthink situations, which had caused problems during timed fitness tests, became an asset when careful analysis was required. Even her struggles with balance and coordination didn't matter when shooting from stable positions with proper support equipment. "The military is looking for athletes," David said. "We're developing craftsmen. Different jobs require different talents." This perspective helped Sarah understand not just her current success, but also her past failures in a new light. She hadn't been deficient, she'd simply been trying to excel in areas that didn't match her natural capabilities. The rejection that had devastated her was actually redirecting her toward a field where she could truly excel. As winter turned to spring, Sarah's training began attracting attention from other instructors at the academy. Her progress through the curriculum was ahead of schedule, and her scores on practical exercises were consistently among the highest in academy records. Mark, the enrollment counselor who had first assessed her abilities, stopped by the range one evening to observe a training session. "I've been doing this for 15 years, he told David afterward, not realizing Sarah could hear their conversation. "I've never seen someone develop this quickly. She's not just learning, she's evolving." The comment filled Sarah with a pride she'd never experienced in her previous jobs. At the diner, competence was measured by speed and multitasking ability, skills that didn't come naturally to her. Here, excellence was defined by precision, consistency, and deep understanding of complex systems. For the first time in her adult life, she was genuinely good at something that mattered. Her newfound confidence began affecting other areas of her life as well. At work, she carried herself differently, spoke up more often, and found herself naturally taking leadership roles during busy shifts. Her roommate Melissa commented that she seemed more focused and purposeful. Even her family noticed the change during phone calls and weekend visits home. "You sound different," her father observed during one of their weekly conversations. "Stronger. More sure of yourself." Sarah knew he was right. The uncertain young woman who had stumbled out of the military recruitment center was being replaced by someone with clear goals and the confidence to pursue them. She was still months away from completing her basic certification, but she was already beginning to think about advanced specializations and career possibilities. David had mentioned several paths available to certified precision marksmen, competitive shooting circuits that offered substantial prize money and sponsorship opportunities, law enforcement positions with tactical teams, private security work that could pay exceptionally well, and even specialized military contractor roles that didn't require traditional military service. Each option represented the kind of meaningful career Sarah had always wanted but never thought she could achieve. The financial investment in her training was straining her budget, but she'd managed to secure one of the Academy's partial scholarships after demonstrating exceptional progress. She'd also picked up extra shifts at the diner and taken on a weekend job cleaning offices to help cover the costs. The sacrifices were significant, but they felt worthwhile in a way that previous struggles never had. Spring brought new challenges to her training regimen. David introduced long-range shooting, engaging targets at distances beyond 800 yards. At these ranges, tiny errors in technique or calculation became dramatically magnified. A slight inconsistency in trigger control could result in missing a target entirely. Environmental factors that barely mattered at shorter distances became critical variables requiring constant attention. "This is where we separate the hobbyists from the professionals," David explained as they set up for her first 1,000-yard attempt. "Anyone can learn to hit targets at 300 yards with enough practice. Consistent performance at extreme ranges requires a completely different level of skill." Sarah's first attempts at long-range shooting were humbling. Shots that would have been perfect at shorter distances missed the target entirely. Wind calls that worked well at 500 yards proved completely inadequate at twice that distance. The mathematical complexity of the ballistics calculations increased exponentially with range, requiring her to master new formulas and measurement techniques. But, as with every previous challenge in her training, initial frustration gave way to gradual improvement. She spent hours studying advanced ballistics texts, learning about concepts like Coriolis effect and spin drift that only mattered at extreme ranges. She practiced estimating wind speeds and directions at multiple points along the bullet's flight path. Most importantly, she developed the patience required to wait for perfect conditions rather than forcing shots when circumstances weren't optimal. Her breakthrough came during a foggy morning session in late April. Atmospheric conditions were challenging, with variable winds and changing light that made target identification difficult. Sarah had been struggling all morning, missing shots that should have been routine for someone with her training level. "Take a break," David suggested after another missed shot. "Sometimes you need to step back and reset your mental approach." Instead of leaving the rifle, Sarah remained in position behind the scope, simply observing the environment without trying to engage targets. She watched the wind patterns in the grass, noting how gusts moved across the range in waves rather than steady flows. She studied how the changing light affected target contrast and her ability to read environmental indicators. Most importantly, she relaxed her desperate need to make every shot perfect. When she finally decided to engage a target again, her approach was completely different. Instead of rushing through her pre-shot routine, she took time to read conditions carefully at multiple points along the bullet's path. Instead of forcing shots when conditions were unfavorable, she waited for lulls in the wind. Her breathing became deeper and more controlled, her trigger squeezed smoother and more deliberate. The shot broke with perfect surprise, and, through the scope, she watched the bullet impact exactly where she'd aimed, nearly 900 yards away. The second shot followed it precisely. By the end of the session, she was consistently hitting targets at ranges that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. "That's what I've been waiting to see," David said with genuine satisfaction. "You just made the transition from student to marksman. Everything else is just refinement and specialization." The comment marked a turning point in Sarah's training and self-perception. She was no longer learning basic skills, she was developing professional capabilities. The woman who had been rejected from military service 8 months earlier was becoming an expert in one of the most demanding technical disciplines in the shooting sports. That evening, as she cleaned her equipment and reviewed her shooting logs, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had changed. The rejection that had felt like the end of her dreams had actually been the beginning of discovering talents she'd never imagined possessing. Her grandfather's old hunting rifle had been replaced by precision equipment worth thousands of dollars. Her casual weekend shooting had evolved into a systematic training regimen that consumed most of her free time and mental energy. More significantly, her sense of identity had fundamentally shifted. She was no longer someone hoping to find her place in the world, she was someone actively building a meaningful career based on her own unique abilities. The military might not have wanted her, but precision shooting had revealed capabilities that even she hadn't known existed. As she drove home that night, Sarah thought about the months of training still ahead of her. Advanced certifications, specialized courses, and, eventually, the transition from student to professional marksman. The path was demanding, but, for the first time in her life, she was walking it with complete confidence in her ability to reach her destination. 18 months after her first day at the Precision Shooting Academy, Sarah stood at the edge of the most challenging test of her career, the Advanced Tactical Marksmanship Certification course. The 3-week intensive program was designed to separate recreational shooters from professional-level operators, combining extreme-range precision shooting with tactical scenarios that simulated real-world applications. Only 60% of candidates typically passed, and those who did often went on to prestigious positions with law enforcement agencies, private security firms, or specialized military contractor roles. The course took place at a remote training facility in the mountains of Colorado, where elevation changes, unpredictable weather, and challenging terrain created conditions that couldn't be replicated at conventional ranges. Sarah's fellow candidates included former military snipers, competitive shooters with international rankings, and law enforcement officers seeking advanced tactical training. At 24 years old, with no military or law enforcement background, she was among the youngest and least experienced candidates in the program. "Welcome to the hardest 3 weeks of your shooting career," announced the lead instructor, a grizzled former Marine named Colonel James Richardson. "By the time you leave here, you'll either be qualified to work at the highest levels of precision marksmanship, or you'll know definitively that this field isn't for you." The opening week focused on extreme range shooting, engaging targets at distances up to 1,500 yards under varying environmental conditions. Sarah had prepared extensively for these challenges, but the reality proved more demanding than any training scenario she'd encountered. Altitude effects at 8,000 feet above sea level required completely new ballistic calculations. Temperature swings of 40 degrees between morning and afternoon sessions meant constant equipment and technique adjustments. Wind patterns in the mountain valleys were unlike anything she'd experienced at sea level ranges. Her first day scores were disappointing. Shots that would have been perfect at her home range missed targets entirely at the higher elevation and longer ranges. The ballistic computer she'd relied on for calculations seemed to provide incorrect data, and her environmental reading skills, so carefully developed over months of training, felt inadequate for the complex mountain conditions. Don't panic, advised her training partner, a former Navy SEAL named Marcus who was taking the course to qualify for a contractor position overseas. Everyone struggles the first few days. The altitude and conditions here are specifically chosen to challenge everything you think you know about shooting. Marcus's calm confidence helped Sarah refocus her approach. Instead of fighting the new environment, she began treating it as an advanced learning opportunity. She spent her evening free time studying mountain meteorology, learning how elevation and terrain features affected wind patterns and atmospheric pressure. She adjusted her equipment setup based on lessons learned during each day's exercises, fine-tuning her rifle and scope settings for the unique conditions. By the middle of the first week, her performance had improved dramatically. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging exercise that required engaging multiple targets at ranges from 800 to 1400 yards, with elevation differences of several hundred feet between shooting position and targets. The scenario simulated providing overwatch security for a team operating in mountainous terrain, requiring both precision shooting and tactical decision-making. Sarah had drawn the most difficult shooting position, located on a rocky outcrop with limited equipment support and constant wind exposure. Other candidates had struggled with the same position throughout the morning, with several failing to achieve the minimum score requirements. As she settled into her shooting position, Sarah applied everything she'd learned about mountain conditions and systematic problem solving. Instead of rushing to engage targets as soon as they appeared, she spent several minutes carefully reading wind conditions at multiple elevations and distances. She identified micro-weather patterns created by the terrain features, noting how wind speed and direction varied significantly between her position and the target locations. Most importantly, she remained patient, waiting for favorable conditions rather than forcing shots when environmental factors were working against her. Her first shot was a perfect hit on the farthest target, a challenging engage at nearly 1400 yards with a 20-degree downward angle. The second and third targets fell in rapid succession, each shot carefully timed to take advantage of brief lulls in the wind. By the time she completed the exercise, she had achieved the highest score of any candidate that day, earning respectful nods from instructors who had been skeptical about her lack of formal military training. Outstanding shooting, Martinez, Colonel Richardson said as he reviewed her targets. You're demonstrating the kind of adaptive thinking that separates good marksmen from exceptional ones. The compliment carried extra weight coming from an instructor known for his demanding standards and reluctant praise. More importantly, it confirmed that Sarah's unconventional path to precision shooting hadn't left her at a disadvantage compared to candidates with traditional military backgrounds. Her systematic approach to problem solving and ability to adapt quickly to new conditions were proving to be significant assets. The second week shifted focus to tactical applications and stress shooting. Candidates were required to perform precision shots while carrying heavy packs, after physical exertion, and under time pressure that simulated combat conditions. These exercises were designed to test not just marksmanship skills, but also the mental toughness required to perform under extreme stress. Sarah's lack of military conditioning initially seemed like it would be a major disadvantage. While former soldiers and Marines moved through tactical exercises with practiced efficiency, she struggled with the physical demands of carrying equipment over rough terrain. The stress shooting exercises, which required making precision shots immediately after sprinting several hundred yards with a full pack, left her exhausted and shaking. However, her months of disciplined training had developed mental resilience that proved more valuable than pure physical conditioning. While other candidates became frustrated and aggressive under pressure, losing the calm focus required for precision shooting, Sarah had learned to compartmentalize stress and maintain her systematic approach even when her body was protesting. The key insight came from Marcus, who had noticed her unique response to pressure situations. Most people try to power through stress, he explained during an evening equipment maintenance session. You've learned to work with it instead of against it. That's actually more useful in real-world applications than raw physical strength. He was right. Sarah's naturally deliberate approach, which had been a liability in military fitness testing, became an asset when precision was more important than speed. Her habit of systematic problem-solving helped her maintain consistent performance even when external conditions were chaotic. Most importantly, her comfort with careful analysis allowed her to make good tactical decisions under pressure, rather than simply reacting impulsively to challenging situations. The final week of certification testing combined all previous elements into complex scenarios that simulated real-world professional applications. Candidates were required to provide sniper support for simulated tactical operations, engaging threats at various ranges while coordinating with ground teams and adapting to rapidly changing situations. The exercises tested not just individual marksmanship skills, but also communication abilities, tactical judgment, and the capacity to function as part of a larger operational team. Sarah's final examination scenario placed her in an overwatch position supporting a hostage rescue operation. The exercise required her to engage multiple threats at ranges from 400 to 1,200 yards, while maintaining communication with a tactical team and avoiding civilian casualties in a complex urban environment. Time pressure was intense, with the scenario designed to compress hours of real-world decision-making into a 30-minute exercise. As she studied the scenario through her scope, Sarah drew upon everything she'd learned over nearly 2 years of training. Environmental conditions were moderate but constantly changing as afternoon weather patterns shifted through the valley. Target identification was challenging, requiring careful observation to distinguish between threats and civilians in the simulated urban environment. Most critically, the timing of her shots had to be coordinated with ground team movements to ensure maximum effectiveness without compromising the overall operation. Her first engagement came at 8 minutes into the scenario, when a threat appeared at a window nearly 900 yards away. The shot required careful compensation for a quartering wind and slight elevation difference, but her preparation paid off with a perfect centermass hit. 2 minutes later, she engaged a closer target that posed an immediate threat to the tactical team, adjusting her point of aim for the dramatically different range and environmental conditions. The most challenging engagement came near the end of the scenario, when multiple threats appeared simultaneously at different ranges and elevations. Sarah had to prioritize targets based on their threat level to the ground team while ensuring her shots wouldn't endanger civilian roleplayers scattered throughout the exercise area. The decisions required split-second tactical judgment combined with precise marksmanship execution. She engaged the highest priority target first, a threat at 600 yards who had a clear shot at approaching team members. The second threat, located at nearly 1,200 yards, required a more complex shot with wind and elevation compensation, but posed a longer-term danger that allowed her time for careful preparation. Her final engagement was the most difficult, a target at moderate range but partially concealed behind cover that limited her aiming points to a small exposed area. All 3 shots were successful, completing the scenario within the time limit and achieving tactical objectives without civilian casualties. As she unloaded her rifle and prepared to leave her shooting position, Sarah realized she had just completed the most complex and demanding shooting challenge of her life with complete success. The formal results announcement came 2 days later, after instructors had reviewed all performance data and conducted individual debriefing sessions with each candidate. Of the 24 shooters who had started the course, 15 had achieved passing grades. Sarah had not only passed but had earned one of the highest overall scores in the program's recent history. "Congratulations, Martinez," Colonel Richardson said during her individual feedback session. "Your performance over the last 3 weeks has been exceptional. You've demonstrated not just advanced marksmanship skills, but also the tactical judgment and mental resilience required for professional-level operations." He handed her a certificate that represented far more than just successful course completion. The Advanced Tactical Marksmanship certification was recognized throughout the precision shooting industry as a mark of elite capability. It qualified her for positions with federal law enforcement agencies, private security firms, competitive shooting sponsorships, and specialized contractor roles that paid salaries she'd never imagined possible. More importantly, the certification represented validation of her complete transformation from rejected military recruit to professional-level marksman. The woman who had been told she lacked the coordination and capability for military service had just completed one of the most demanding precision shooting programs in the world with distinction. As she packed her equipment for the trip home, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 2 years earlier, she had been a struggling waitress with shattered dreams and no clear direction for her life. Military rejection had felt like confirmation of every insecurity and limitation she'd ever harbored about herself. Now she possessed skills that placed her among the top tier of precision marksmen in the country. More significantly, she had developed the confidence and self-knowledge that came from excelling in an extremely demanding field. The military might not have recognized her potential, but the precision shooting world certainly had. The certification opened doors to opportunities she'd never imagined. Several instructors had already approached her about teaching positions at various academies. A competitive shooting sponsor had expressed interest in supporting her tournament career. Most intriguingly, a private security firm had extended a preliminary job offer for an overseas contract position that would pay more in 1 year than she'd made in her entire life working at the diner. For the first time since leaving home for college, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The rejection that had devastated her had ultimately led to discovering capabilities and pursuing opportunities that wouldn't have existed in a traditional military career. As her plane lifted off from Colorado, carrying her home with a certificate that represented professional validation and unlimited possibilities, Sarah understood that her transformation was complete. The uncertain young woman who had stumbled out of a recruitment center had become an elite precision marksman with the skills and credentials to work anywhere in the world. The best part of her journey, however, wasn't the technical achievement or career prospects. It was the knowledge that she had found her true calling, the field where her natural abilities and acquired skills combined to create exceptional performance. After years of feeling like she didn't quite fit anywhere, she had discovered her place in the world. 2 years after earning her advanced tactical marksmanship certification, Sarah Martinez stood on a rooftop in Eastern Europe, her custom-built precision rifle trained on a target 1,200 yards away through swirling snow. The wind was gusting unpredictably through the urban canyon below, and the temperature had dropped 15 degrees since she'd taken position 3 hours earlier. In her earpiece, the tactical team leader's voice crackled with tension. "Overwatch, we need that target neutralized in 60 seconds or the whole operation is compromised." This was no training exercise. Sarah was now a senior precision marksman for Aegis International, one of the world's premier private security firms, conducting a high-stakes hostage rescue operation that would determine whether 3 captured humanitarian workers lived or died. The scared young woman who had been rejected from military service had become one of the most sought-after tactical marksmen in the private security industry. The transformation from certified marksman to elite operative hadn't happened overnight. After completing her tactical certification, Sarah had spent 6 months working as a firearms instructor while carefully evaluating career opportunities. The teaching position at a law enforcement academy had provided steady income and valuable experience working with professional operators, but it had also revealed her desire for more challenging field applications of her skills. The offer from Aegis International had come through Colonel Richardson, who maintained extensive contacts throughout the security industry. The company specialized in high-risk protection services, hostage rescue operations, and security consulting for multinational corporations operating in dangerous regions. They were looking for a precision marksman with advanced tactical training and the mental resilience to perform under extreme pressure. "We don't hire recreational shooters or weekend warriors," the Aegis recruiter had explained during Sarah's initial interview. "Our operations involve real bullets, real consequences, and situations where failure means people die. We need someone who can make impossible shots when everything is going wrong and the pressure is unbearable." Sarah's lack of military combat experience had initially been a concern, but her exceptional performance during practical evaluations had quickly silenced any doubts about her capabilities. The company's testing protocol involved scenarios that were intentionally more challenging than typical combat situations, designed to identify operators who could maintain peak performance under conditions that would break lesser marksmen. Her first assignment had been a security detail protecting a corporate executive visiting a politically unstable region in South America. The job had seemed routine until intelligence reports indicated a credible assassination threat against their principal. Sarah had spent 72 hours in an overwatch position, maintaining constant vigilance while local security forces attempted to neutralize the threat. The assignment had ended without her firing a shot, but it had provided valuable experience working with international teams and adapting to foreign operational environments. Subsequent assignments had been progressively more challenging: counter-sniper operations in urban environments, security for high-value asset movements through hostile territory, and precision shooting support for direct action missions that couldn't be handled through official channels. Each operation had added to her experience base and professional reputation.
The current mission in Eastern Europe represented the culmination of her development as an elite operative.
The humanitarian workers had been captured by a criminal organization that was demanding ransom payments and political concessions that multiple governments refused to provide. Official rescue attempts through diplomatic channels had failed, prompting the workers' families to hire Aegis International for a private rescue operation. Sarah's role was to provide precision fire support for a 6-man tactical team that would assault the building where the hostages were being held. Intelligence indicated that the criminals were using the captives as human shields, making the operation extremely dangerous and requiring surgical precision from the overwatch position. One poorly placed shot could kill an innocent person. Failure to engage legitimate threats could result in the death of tactical team members or hostages. The target that appeared in her scope was a sentry positioned at a window overlooking the tactical team's planned approach route. Intelligence photos had confirmed his identity as one of the kidnappers, and his position allowed him to engage the rescue team before they could reach the building entrance. The shot was complicated by the urban environment, with multiple glass surfaces and potential civilian exposure requiring careful consideration of bullet trajectory and fragmentation patterns. Sarah's breathing slowed automatically as she settled into her final firing position. 2 years of intensive training and operational experience had made the pre-shot routine completely instinctive. She read the wind patterns visible in blowing snow and chimney smoke, calculated the ballistic compensation required for the range and environmental conditions, and identified the precise aiming point that would ensure immediate target incapacitation without endangering anyone else in the building. The shot broke with perfect surprise timing, her trigger control smooth and consistent despite the sub-freezing temperature and adrenaline coursing through her system. Through her scope, she watched the bullet impact exactly where she had aimed, neutralizing the threat instantly and clearing the way for the tactical team's approach. "Target down," she reported calmly into her radio. "Approach route is clear." The rescue operation continued for another 40 minutes, with Sarah providing precision fire support for the tactical team as they fought their way through the building. 2 more precision shots were required to eliminate threats that appeared during the assault, each engagement successful despite challenging conditions and extreme time pressure. When the tactical team finally emerged with all 3 hostages alive and unharmed, Sarah felt a sense of professional satisfaction that exceeded anything she had experienced in her previous careers. This wasn't just about demonstrating marksmanship skills, it was about using her abilities to save innocent lives and support teammates who were risking everything to complete a dangerous mission. The successful conclusion of the Eastern European operation marked Sarah's establishment as one of Aegis International's senior operators. Her combination of exceptional technical skills, tactical judgment, and mental resilience under pressure had made her invaluable to the company's most challenging assignments. Contract offers now came from around the world, with clients specifically requesting her services for operations requiring the highest level of precision marksmanship. The financial rewards matched the professional recognition. Her annual income now exceeded what she had previously earned in 5 years of restaurant work, and successful completion bonuses for high-risk operations provided additional compensation that allowed her to support her family and build substantial savings for the first time in her life. More importantly, the work provided the sense of purpose and meaningful contribution that she had originally sought through military service. 6 months after the European operation, Sarah found herself in another challenging assignment, this time providing security for a medical relief convoy traveling through territory controlled by hostile forces. The mission required her to operate from a mobile platform, engaging threats from a moving vehicle while coordinating with ground security teams and air support elements. The convoy came under attack during the 3rd day of movement, when insurgent forces attempted to disable the lead vehicle with an improvised explosive device. Sarah's vehicle was positioned 400 yards behind the main convoy, providing overwatch coverage for the surrounding terrain. When enemy fighters appeared in elevated positions overlooking the convoy route, she had less than 30 seconds to identify and engage multiple threats before they could bring effective fire to bear on the medical vehicles. Her first target was an insurgent fighter positioned behind cover at 600 yards, partially concealed but preparing to engage the convoy with a rocket-propelled grenade. The shot required immediate execution without time for detailed environmental reading or ballistic calculations. Sarah relied on her instinctive understanding of the conditions and 2 years of experience shooting from unstable platforms. The shot was successful, eliminating the primary threat before he could engage the convoy. 2 additional targets required engagement as the convoy continued moving, each shot taken from a different position and range as her vehicle maneuvered through the terrain. All engagements were successful, allowing the medical convoy to reach its destination without casualties among the relief workers or civilian population they were serving. The convoy security mission represented another evolution in Sarah's professional development. She was no longer just a precision marksman, she had become a complete tactical operator capable of adapting her skills to any operational environment and mission requirement. Her reputation within the private security industry was now such that companies competed for her services, offering increasingly lucrative contracts and prestigious assignments. The offers included opportunities that would have seemed impossible 3 years earlier. A prestigious position with the Federal Law Enforcement Agency's tactical unit, which would provide domestic assignments and federal benefits but lower overall compensation. A competitive shooting sponsorship that would allow her to travel the world participating in international matches while representing major equipment manufacturers. Multiple corporate training positions where she could develop curricula and instruct the next generation of precision marksmen. Most intriguingly, several government contractors had approached her about specialized positions that would combine her tactical skills with high-level security clearance work. These roles offered the highest compensation and most challenging assignments, but also required commitments that would limit her operational flexibility and require extensive background investigations. As Sarah considered her various options during a brief leave period at home, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this crossroads. The military rejection that had devastated her had ultimately led to discovering capabilities and pursuing a career path that wouldn't have been possible through traditional service. Her current position in the security industry provided opportunities for meaningful work, exceptional compensation, and professional recognition that exceeded her original military aspirations. More significantly, she had developed a sense of professional identity and personal confidence that went far beyond her specific technical skills. The uncertain young woman who had struggled to find her place in the world had become a recognized expert in one of the most demanding professional fields. The physical coordination issues that had prevented her from passing military fitness tests had proven irrelevant to precision marksmanship, where different physical and mental attributes were required for success. Her relationship with her family had also been transformed by her professional success. Her father, whose disappointment after her military rejection had been painful to witness, now spoke with obvious pride about her accomplishments. Her younger brother Miguel had changed his own career plans after visiting one of Sarah's training sessions, deciding to pursue law enforcement work partly inspired by her example. During a family dinner at her childhood home, Sarah's grandfather had pulled out his old hunting rifle, the same weapon that had first introduced her to shooting years earlier. "You've taken this further than I ever imagined possible, Mija," he said with tears in his eyes. "Your grandmother would be so proud of what you've become." The comment carried particular weight because it acknowledged not just her professional achievements, but her personal growth and development as well. The scared, uncertain young woman who had left the military recruitment center in tears had become someone who could handle life and death responsibilities with calm competence and unshakable confidence. As Sarah prepared for her next assignment, a high-profile security detail protecting a diplomatic envoy in a region experiencing active conflict, she understood that her transformation was now complete. She had evolved from rejected military recruit to elite precision marksman to senior tactical operator, each stage building upon the previous one to create capabilities she had never imagined possessing. The rejection that had seemed like the end of her dreams had actually been the beginning of a journey toward discovering her true potential. The military might have been looking for one type of capability, but the precision shooting world had revealed different talents that were equally valuable and, perhaps better suited to her unique combination of skills and characteristics. Standing on her apartment balcony the night before departing for her next mission, Sarah looked up at the stars and thought about the scared young woman who had sat on a bench outside a recruitment center 3 years earlier. That version of herself seemed like a different person now, someone whose limitations had been defined by other people's standards rather than her own potential. Now she knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of achieving. The transformation from day one rejected recruit to elite sniper was complete, but the journey of professional and personal development would continue for the rest of her career. She had found not just a job, but a calling that utilized her natural abilities and provided the sense of purpose and accomplishment she had always sought. The woman who walked into that recruitment center had been looking for someone to give her a chance to serve. The woman who emerged from years of training and operational experience had become someone that the world's most demanding employers sought out for their most critical missions. Sometimes the most devastating rejections lead to the most remarkable discoveries, and Sarah's story was proof that true success comes not from fitting into other people's expectations, but from finding the place where your unique talents can flourish.